current board makeup also includes representatives with expertise in affordable housing, the SCAG executive director, and the chair and vice chair of the Citizens Oversight Committee. And our understanding, though, is that this is still a fluid situation, that still changes are still being made. And another important component for this new agency would be authorized to issue bonds and place funding measures on the ballot. Specific measures include a parcel tax, a gross receipts business license tax, real estate documentary transfer tax. And our understanding is that there is an intent to put something on the ballot in November of 2022.
Caitlin, I apologize for interrupting you. Can I just ask staff to move over board member Patty Cortez? She's now in the attendees pool. Sorry, Caitlin, proceed.
No, that's okay. Thank you. Nice. Don't get too far ahead of myself. I guess we can look ahead, actually. And yes, another component is that the legislation clearly lays out how funding would be allocated. At least 50% will go towards affordable housing creation, and of that 50%, 70% would be allocated to the COGS, the city of Los Angeles, the city of Long Beach, the county of Long Beach. 70% of those 50% funds would be allocated based on the percentage of very low and low income RHNA allocation. So for the San Gabriel Valley, that is about 12%, 10 and 12%. The remaining 30% would be allocated by the Citizens Advisory Group within the parameters set forth by the agency as a whole. Between 30 and 40% would be allocated towards renter protections. And those are things like renter protections, rental eviction, defense, those kinds of things. Half of that would be allocated to the COGS, the city of Los Angeles, city of Long Beach, the county. And that would be based on a per low income renter basis. And the remaining 50% would be directed by the board, and again, accordance with their agency guidelines. And the final, if you do the math here, the final 10%, not more than 10%, would be for administration. So just this slide just gives you an idea. If the agency were to raise $500 million, this is what it would look like for each of the funding categories and potentially the San Gabriel Valley. So now getting to the important part, obviously this legislation is moving forward very quickly, which is the reason that we're meeting today so quickly. So these are the recommendations that staff has for amendments to legislation in order for this entity to support. This includes allowing for a local administration, and specifically what that means is the trust should receive a direct transfer of funds to administer at its discretion. I mean, of course, in accordance with the priorities of the overall agency. Also, I talked about on the previous slide the formula, the funding formulas. Also, another recommended amendment is maximizing that formula funding. For example, when we talk about the 70% being allocated to the COGS and City of Los Angeles, et cetera, we feel that and 30% by the Citizens Advisory Group Board, we feel like those that 30% should be reduced. And also, you probably saw the 10% for administration. We feel that is too high. We mentioned in the staff report for Measure M, it's closer to 1 to 3%. So that's something that we feel should be incorporated into this as well. I didn't talk about the actual income targets in the presentation, but in the staff report, hopefully you saw that each project would be required to meet specific affordability goals with certain percentages of very low and extremely low income housing. We feel that that's too difficult to do on an individual project by project basis. So instead that there should be another approach, for example, a more holistic approach used to make sure that the overall goals of increasing affordability, housing at the lowest levels of affordability is accomplished. And then finally, ensuring adequate geographic representation, specifically increasing the representation for the San Gabriel Valley on the board of directors. So those are the items that we talked about in the staff report. We did have a couple of other items that were recommended as well. Incorporating funding caps for consultants and outside travel expenses, and then just also strengthening accountability and transparency for the entity as well. So that was very fast. Our recommended action today is the resolution adopting 2111 to support if amended. Another alternative is to oppose unless amendments unless amended. or any other action that the board would like to take. And I know that we also have some representatives from our legislative office here. I know that Senator Rubio's staff is here. There may be others as well. So I do want to ask if any of them would like to make any sort of comment or statement. Brielle will be able to let you speak. Sorry for going so quickly.
Thank you, Caitlin. Do we have any legislative staff who would like to speak to the staff presentation at this time?
If the legislative staff, he's raising his hand. Alex Hirsch from Senator Rubio's office. He could be promoted to a panelist.
I see him here. Alex, can you hear us? Are you with us? I see his name on panel.
Yes, thank you, Chair Liano, and good morning, everyone. My name is Alex Hirsch. I'm the policy consultant for Senator Susan Rubio, and I don't have anything additional to add. I think Caitlin did a wonderful job giving the staff presentation. Again, thanking all of the members of the board for convening for this morning's special meeting on short notice. But Senator Rubio truly does appreciate the comments and feedback from the board. As a former local elected official herself, she knows how important it is for any potential countywide agency to strike the proper balance between the concerns of local communities in the San Gabriel Valley and the county overall. So your discussion and direction will be very helpful in terms of informing Senator Rubio of how she should proceed with this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Do we have anybody else from either of the legislative staffs that would like to speak to the presentation provided by Caitlin Sims earlier? I'll if there is anyone, just please let the staff know, and I guess I'll open it up to the board for discussion. Do we have any questions for staff, or Caitlin, do you have anything to add?
I forgot to add the most important thing. And one of the reasons that we're bringing this for you today is that we do see this as a potential ongoing sustainable funding source for the regional housing trusts. So that is one of the reasons, that is an important reason why the recommendation is what it is before you. So now I'll let you all continue. Sorry.
I'll open it up to questions from the board. We could either use the raise hand function, but we're pressed for time. So I'll just leave it to my fellow board members to, Mr. Boyer, I see your hand is raised, please.
Well, I'm not going to have a real popular opinion here, but we continue to make decisions that increases the cost of housing in order to try to decrease the cost of housing. We're talking about an additional parcel tax, an additional business tax, and increasing the documentary transfer tax. All three of these things are going to increase the cost of housing. And then we're going to take a portion of that money and reinvest it in order to try to create new housing. We have to stop increasing the cost of housing in general. That's what needs to be done. And personally, in this particular idea, we have our Measure H funding, of which I don't think there's one city on here that's gotten a fair share of Measure H funding back. And the same with our Safe Clean Water Act committee that's making decisions on stormwater. In the San Gabriel Valley, we are not getting the funds back that we are contributing to organizations like this. And so I do not think this is a good idea at this point for a variety of different reasons, but most importantly is we have to start realizing that we have to stop increasing the cost of housing at some point, as California has the highest housing prices in the country, and we just keep adding on to it.
Thank you, Councilmember Boyer. Vice Chair Shevlin, I see your hand is raised, please.
Yes, I agree with Gary in my conversations over the weekend with various individuals and including Senator Rubio's staff. In concept, I agree that it is wonderful if we could have a dedicated source, but on the heels of Measure H and some of the transportation bills of the water quality provisions or measures, we just never get our fair share. So unless there's an absolute dedicated amount that's coming to us that's commensurate with what we're putting in terms of marketing this or a ballot measure, I told them, I indicated that my city, I know that Monrovia would be definitely against it, and especially since so many of us that had tax measures to hit that cap, they used Measure H as the poster child of why this was needed. And I just, the sell on this would be very difficult, but I think most of us like the idea that we would have a dedicated funding stream, but the devil is in the details, and what we would definitely be guaranteed back is the question. I know that, do we have a recommended, let's see, recommended in terms of support or oppose? I know that an oppose unless amended is a little stronger and may provide a little more leverage. I'm not quite sure how all that works, but at any rate, those are my 2 cents.
We have to go sit down now. Sorry.
Do we have any other governing board members who wish to either ask questions of staff or make comments?
Jed, I did have one more question if nobody's raising their hand.
Please proceed.
And Caitlin, that little graph that you had, the 500 million that would be generated, what did they use what was the premise on that?
And that was actually just a proxy number. I mean, I was showing as an example, it's more showing what the percentages would look like. For example, if it was 500 million, which is a number we actually have heard thrown out there, the percentage would look like for the singular value.
Right.
So that's not a number, so the real true number.
Right. And
Well, Caitlin, if I could just supplement that response, if that's okay. In the meeting with United Way of Greater Los Angeles, which is the bill sponsor, the representative said that 500 million was based on an estimate of a documentary transfer tax. So you have 3 different alternatives for a potential revenue source. One is a documentary transfer tax on real estate transactions. That transfer tax would be limited to transactions above $3 million. And with that, the estimate was it would raise approximately $500 million.
so would that be a flat tax over 3 million or a percentage over 3 million? Because we already have the one now, the $75.
I think they haven't firmly established any of this. All they've established in the legislation are the shares. That is based in turn on the RENA numbers allocated for each subregion and city. It could be right now, as I understood it from the proponent, it was based on a flat tax above 3 million, but they were considering progressive alternatives where if it went above 5 million, if the transaction, and this would pertain to all real estate transactions in LA County, industrial, commercial, residential. Above 3 million, a certain percentage, above another, say 5 million, perhaps a higher percentage. They haven't settled on that, and I don't think they will until they get closer. If they get this authorization through the legislature to create this entity, and the authorization, thus they're granted the authorization to place a ballot measure before the voters, and they intend to do that in November 2022. And that's why they really want to see the legislation move this week. This is the last week to move the legislation through the Senate Appropriations Committee. Otherwise, it becomes a 2-year bill, and they miss that window for the November 22 ballot.
And there was some question as well because of the voter approval rate that it could possibly be changed to 2/3 versus the 50+1.
Yeah, so I'm not as familiar with that, but yeah, my understanding is right now the requirement for that documentary transfer tax would be a majority vote rather than a supermajority vote of the LA County voters.
Thank you for that, Paul. Mr. Boyer, I see you have your hand raised. Do you have a follow-up question or additional comments?
I just wanted to clarify, documentary transfer tax currently in LA County is 1.1%. So we're already paying every time there's a real estate transfer, somebody is paying 1.1% of a documentary transfer tax. So that would be on top of what is already in place.
Yes.
Right, and then that other fee, recording fee that we have for real estate transactions as well.
Yeah, that actually was just a recording fee
Right,
on,
right.
yeah, $75 per recording.
Right,
And so, you know, that's an additional new tax that was put on housing.
right.
I'll go down the row because I know that we have a couple of board members who have meetings at 9 a.m. I'll go down and see if, are there any other requests to ask questions of staff or make comments relating to the agenda item? Ms. DeFrank, please.
Yeah, I just had one question about the renter protection and support. Within the bill itself, was there anything about who would be enacting or who would be overseeing that? Because it talks about rental assistance and I know that there's probably one or two legal services, counseling, all of that. Is it awarded to not-for-profits, or does it speak to it at all as to who would benefit from providing the services outside of the actual people themselves?
For that particular category, it's left more open-ended that local governments, NGOs, others could access those funds. An important component as well, and actually we do have a representative, I think that Tommy Newman is here as well, from United Way. But another component is that this is a big component is the rental assistance to help support the bond issuances as well. So it's a very large category, but it doesn't specifically specify who amongst those broader groups of NGOs, local governments, et cetera, would be administering those funds.
For staff, Caitlin and Brielle, I see on the participants of call-in participant, Director Finley. Is she paneled in so that she could vote?
I believe she is here now. I don't know how anyone did that.
Okay, she's in the attendee side, so I don't know. Yeah,
Jed, I can hear you.
Okay, great. I just wanted to make sure that you were able to talk if you wanted to. Okay, let me see. I'm looking for raised hands. Becky, do you have additional questions? I see your hands up.
Following up on what Benita just said, in terms of the rental assistance, now I know that we're really concentrating on the dedicated funding source for our housing trust, but in terms of a dedicated source for that rental assistance, are we talking about trying to get a dedicated percentage for that as well that we would be able to administer as well?
Yeah, no, the recommendation is, and I should have put that on this slide, my apologies, but the recommendation is that for the percentage that goes back to the San Gabriel Valley or to the San Gabriel Valley, that would also be administered by the trust. But I know another component, I mean, what the United Way is looking to do with this, these sorts of measures is actually really potentially fundamentally changing the way that affordable housing is funded. Here in California, it's looking at kind of trying to get beyond all the developers having to go for tax credits, but also having, by having a large enough funding source with kind of a dedicated revenue stream in order to issue larger bonds. So that really is one of the other questions. And again, one thing I did want to mention is that just as a reminder that the funding piece is separate. I mean, the whether or not this agency becomes an entity or not, there's still going to have to be a ballot measure that goes forward. So just keep that in mind as you're having the discussions.
That's what I've been contending. The devil is in the details and how you're able to actually market it as a ballot measure.
Right.
Okay, Caitlin. It looks like we're just running up a couple of minutes into 9 a.m. So I'll try to put out a call. Is there anyone else on the governing board who has questions or comments before we proceed with some action on the item?
Director Cortez has a hand raised.
Oh, I apologize. Please, Director Cortez.
That's okay. And Caitlin, it's mainly more for clarification. So the local control that you're advocating, like in the memo, just clarify for me, because I didn't catch all of it. Is that something that we're proposing as an amendment, or is that already like written into the bill?
The part that's written into the bill is the percentages themselves. And for the amendment, we're advocating for basically the direct allocation to the trust that the trust is administering. That's the specific amendment request.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay, and I'm trying to scope. Becky, I still see your
Oh,
hand
I'm
raised.
sorry. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm
Do we have
sorry.
any other raised hands for questions or comments from the governing board? Just for clarification, can we go back to the slide with the staff's recommendation?
I think
Okay,
this is
so
probably the one you want. Yes.
thank you very much. So the recommended actions are some sort of position on the legislation with an incorporation. And I suppose now the issue is simply that we have a staff recommendation of support if amend. It has also been suggested an oppose unless amended. And so those are our, if I'm not mistaken, that's our menu of options, correct?
Yes.
Okay, are there any other variables that we need
Becky
to
has
go
a
over before we take
point.
action? Vice Chair Shevlin, please.
Did we want, on the incorporate funding caps for consultants and outside travel expenses, did we want to really be more specific on that in terms of administrative costs? Do we have, oh, here, there it is, excuse me, it says reduced percentage of it, I see it, it's up there, thanks, sorry.
Okay, so the staff recommendation is to incorporate 6 proposals or 6 suggestions. And we have a menu of options before us to either, but either way, they both request us to consider a position. So I'll bring it back to the board. Last call for any deliberation or discussion. I see Vice Chair Shevlin. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I see 2. Yes, please. Vice Chair Shevlin.
I was just going to say to take the stronger stance of oppose unless amended.
Okay, so is that a motion?
Yes.
Okay, so we have a motion to adopt the staff recommendation, amending the staff recommendation to oppose unless amended, but incorporating the suggested amendments listed on the staff presentation slide. Is that correct, Vice Chair
Yes.
Shevlin?
Yes.
Finley would second that.
We have a second from Board Member Finley. And before I proceed, I see your hand is raised. Mr. Boyer, did you want to?
Well, at this point, we have a motion on the table, but I would like to have seen added to those amendments that this not be funded with additional taxes on housing. So if they can figure out a way to do it without putting more people in the street, because additional taxes is going to create more homeless issues.
So I suppose that's a suggestion for an amendment. Vice Chair Shevlin, is that a friendly amendment or do we need to vote on that amendment?
I don't, Gary, I agree with you because quite honestly, the more taxes, people are taxed out and all these are with the exception of the business license tax.
Well, Becky, if I could just share real quick, on the average, for me personally, my tenants pay about $30 a month to cover business license fees. Business license fees on rental housing is outrageous. And so to increase that is just going to hurt tenants.
So just to confirm, I want to make sure that I understand the requested amendment. The amendment is to amend the legislation to prohibit taxes.
Oh, to be able to do this with existing funding.
And Vice Chair Shevlin, that's you'll incorporate that into your motion, bypassing the necessity for a vote.
Well, I'd like to hear from the others because that's pretty rough. I feel that going to the voters to make that final decision, but I get you, Gary. Okay, I'll just go ahead and ask to do within existing funding.
And we have Mr. Hubler. I saw that you unmuted yourself. Did you want to add anything to address this?
Well, right now, you know, the legislation identifies 3 funding mechanisms: parcel tax, gross receipts, business tax. and real estate. So 2 of those 3 would affect the cost of real estate.
All 3 would.
Yeah. So, what this was intended was to supplant, in preparation for the expiration of Measure H, which is a sales tax initiative. I don't know. I would recommend perhaps an amendment that suggests that the legislation authorize among its authorization should include those sources of revenues which would not increase the cost of residential real estate.
that and how if they could come up with something.
I think they're trying to
Yeah.
aim for a nexus here
Yeah.
between
Right.
the fee and the result, which is to increase the supply of housing.
Mhm.
Now, I hear you that by the fee, you may restrict the supply of housing. So you're kind of operating at cross purposes, but I think the intent obviously was to establish a nexus between the fee and the result.
Jerry, would you be okay with the wording that Paul just provided?
Yeah, if it could be done without using a tax-free source that would increase the
Is
cost of housing, yes.
housing. Okay,
Yes, I'd be okay with that.
okay.
So, okay, so Vice Chair Shevlin, I apologize for calling people by their first names. Vice Chair Shevlin,
That's okay.
you're accepting a friendly amendment from Board Member Boyer, and
Per Paul Hubert, Hubler's, I'm sorry, his recommendations on the wording on that.
And Mr. Hubler, just so that the board members are abundantly clear on what it is that we're amending the staff recommendation to, can you just give us I apologize, but this is dense. Can you just give us what is the suggested amendment?
Yeah, the recommendation that the legislation would authorize a revenue source that would not result in increasing the cost of housing.
Okay. Okay, everyone's good with that? With that explanation? Vice Chair Shevlin, good with you?
I'm good with it.
No need to vote on the amendment because you agree with it, okay? Let me see here. I'm looking for raised hands. I see, no, that's not a raised hand. Are there any other raised hands from the board or questions or comments? I don't see any. So there's a
Actually,
motion on, I'm
Jen, if I
sorry.
could make one quick comment here, and I just want to remind everyone again that it's not the legislation would allow this particular entity to move forward with a ballot measure such that
Right.
we're talking about. It wouldn't necessarily change. I mean, this would, another ballot measure could move forward that is not controlled by, for example, this entity. So just keeping that in mind, that this wouldn't be stopping future ballot measures from that could increase the cost of real estate. So just keeping that in mind, that's all I wanted to throw out.
Right. They could come up with all sorts of other different options.
Correct.
Okay. So we have on the floor a motion by Vice Chair Shevlin, a second by Board Member Finley, and it has been amended, and we've discussed the amendment. And first, I'll just open up. Is there any public comment on? Do I need to take public comment on this, legal counsel?
If the public comment I thought came in the beginning, was there anybody that wanted? Yeah.
Okay, very good. Public comment has already been taken. So now there's an action. And so I'll take it to the board for a vote.
Okay, Chair Liano,
Yes.
Vice Chair Shevlin,
Yes.
Director Averill,
Yes.
Director Boyer,
Yes.
okay, Director Cortez,
Yes.
Director Finley,
Yes.
okay, and Director DeFrank.
Yes.
Okay, that completes our agenda item. I want to thank everyone for so rapidly making themselves available. I apologize for the short notice. I also want to thank the staffers who came here to be in attendance from Senator Rubio's office, Senator Portantino's office, and everyone else who came to provide public comment or input. With that, it is 9:04, and seeing no other business, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Sorry for the short notice.
Thank you.
Thank you.